So welcome to this week's Optimum Health Clinic Facebook Live. And there seems to be a bit of a theme that's been developing over the last few weeks. And there was going to be a live interview this evening, and there was a few technical things which we're still figuring out. But I will be next week doing I think the first live interview we've done on one of these Facebook sessions. So that will be an interesting test of my technical abilities. And that's going to be with Emma Donoghue, who recently was featured on a BBC Newsbeat documentary about MECFS. And she was a patient of Optimum Health Clinic, and she's going to be talking about the key role that the clinic played in her kind of recovery journey that she wasn't able to talk about as part of the documentary. So that should be interesting, assuming that technically all goes to plan. And as I say, this week is a kind of continuation of a theme. I talked a bit last week about the importance of dreaming, of kind of having a sense of a kind of allowing our mind to have a sense of a kind of compelling future that we're kind of moving towards. And I talked, I think it was the week before, about the importance of giving up. And the importance of being able to really let go, let ourselves be where we are in a sense, kind of just sometimes just surrender to the experience and to the moment. And I kind of realized that there was a kind of a piece that kind of sat with kind of between or within these two pieces, which was around the ability to be in the now, to be here, to be present in this moment. Sometimes in spite of what we're experiencing in the moment, sometimes because of what we're experiencing in the moment. And sometimes this can be one of the most challenging or difficult things to do in life, particularly when we feel like we're suffering, when we feel like we want to get away from where we are. Sometimes when we're going through particularly kind of painful and difficult things, we will disappear out of our body and out of our emotions into our mind as a kind of hiding place to get away from what we're experiencing. That can actually be one of the causes of maladaptive stress response, that our whole nervous system is revving up to allow us to escape the feelings, the emotions of what we're experiencing. And yet, when we're in a particularly intense or difficult experience, often the most powerful place to meet that experience is by being completely here, present in the moment. And an example of that is when we're in intense pain. If we have some kind of physical injury or some reason we're particularly in intense pain, strangely, by fully allowing the experience, breathing into the experience. I mean, childbirth, dare I as a man make comment on childbirth, but I think I'll probably lose half the viewing public by doing that. But as an observation, I would say that certainly often the experience in childbirth can be that by fully going to the heart, to the center of what's being experienced, actually there's a place of peace and a place of space that can be found in doing that. It's also true to say that often when we're suffering, what adds to our suffering is the suffering we have about our suffering. And I'll explain a bit more what I mean about that. It's like we can be in significant emotional or physical pain, and that's painful. You know, there's inherent suffering that is there with that. But the layers we put on top of that, the things that we make that mean, the things we make that not mean, the stories we tell ourselves about why that's happened, why it's not going to change, what the future means, all of that other stuff that we do is a whole new compounding of suffering that we are experiencing. So, you know, we talk on the recovery path, for example, around snowball thinking. So you're having a bad day or a bad few days, and then what starts to happen is it starts to become, I'm never going to recover. If I never recover, it's going to mean this and it's going to mean that. And before we know it, we're homeless, with no one in our life that cares for us, with no money, severely ill for the rest of our life. And it's like we've taken our current experience and made it dramatically worse by our mind telling ourselves the kind of horror stories about all the worst case scenarios of what might happen. Put another way, it's like we have this is the experience that's the suffering, And then we have all the story around it, all the fears, the anxieties, the pressures, the judgments. You've got the original suffering, but then this layer that goes on top, it almost clasps and kind of traps what's there. And that original suffering might be there, and then it would just kind of blossom and move and pass through. But all that stuff we put on top of it is what causes us to get stuck in the state that we're in. The more we can be present, the more we can just be allowing of in the moment of what we're experiencing. It's like our emotions and physical pain can be like waves that come and they go. If we're not trapping them, if we're not holding them, if we're not getting caught in story about them, they're much more fluid, and it's much easier for them to rise and fall and to come and go. It's also true to say that if we spend all of our life worrying about the past or feeling bad or guilty about the past, or worrying about the future or trying to live in the future or create the future or being scared of the future, wherever we are, which isn't in the now, is ultimately taking us away from where the aliveness, the richness, the livingness of our life actually is happening. Like, without wanting to get too hysterical about it, now is all there is. That's why it's called the present. It's a gift. It's the present. It's the present of awareness being here in this moment. If we're never actually here, then we're never actually really fully living our life. Even if what's here is sometimes painful or difficult, if we're never present to it, then we're never actually experiencing our life as it is. And if we're not present to it, also we're not in our body. And if we're not in our body, then we're not in a healing state. And so we also perpetuate the cycle of we don't want to be in the now because it feels uncomfortable, but the more we avoid it, the more uncomfortable it becomes, and therefore it just becomes a kind of a self-feeding monster, as it were. So the question is, how can we be more present? Like, how do we get to be more here in the now? And like anything in life, it's a practice. And so if you want your attention or your awareness to be more here, to be more in the moment, you have to train your awareness to be here. And that's a lot of what happens in meditation, in mindfulness practice. And that's a bit beyond the scope of this video, but there's lots of resources and ways of learning those practices. But it's also not just what happens in the practice of doing meditation, because you can have a wonderful meditation sat on a meditation cushion or on a chair or in bed or whatever, and then come out of it and our whole kind of mind and nervous system is kind of all overstimulated again. So it's also training your attention and your awareness to be able to be present and here in the moment that you are experiencing. And that's partly meditation practice, but it's also using things in your daily life as a source of practice to bring your attention and bring your awareness back. For a number of years, about 15, 16 years, I was in, I was 20s actually, I was in a group of learning meditation, mindfulness and psychotherapeutic pieces as part of a kind of ongoing group. And one of the things that we used to do is on a regular basis on the week-long retreats is practice doing tedious tasks as slowly and with as much awareness as we could. And sometimes something as basic as washing up or brushing your teeth or walking from, the context of early stages of recovery, maybe even walking from the bed to the sofa could be done in a more mindful and a slower and more connected and more present way. What that does is it allows us to more richly experience this moment, to more richly experience the smells that are around, the perhaps nice sounds that are around, the sensations, the feelings, the emotions. And it's sometimes the most simple and basic things which are the most nourishing, the most satisfying, the most supportive, that we're completely oblivious to because we're so busy worrying about the past, what's going to happen, worrying about the future, frustrated about the past, not here and the now, not liking what we're feeling, trying to get away from symptoms, trying to manage anxiety patterns, all the kind of stuff that's going on. And actually, right here in this moment, there is a whole other set of things that we could be giving our awareness and our attention to, which could be much more nurturing, satisfying, bring much more pleasure, much more joy to our experience and to our life. And that is a conditioning and a training of our mind to allow us to do that. As I say, the purpose of the video is not really to go into that training process. The purpose of this video is to kind of provide some direction and pointing towards why this is important and the difference that it can make towards the recovery process. And fundamentally, the difference it can make to the recovery process is firstly, you end up more consistently in a healing state, because when you're more present and you're more here and you're more in the now, your nervous system calms down and settles in there. But also, it will allow us to be more aware of what's happening. We tend to be less booming and busting and up and down and everything else because we have a more steady attention and awareness in terms of what's happening. It also supports our mood. We're more likely to be happy, to be enjoying our life, enjoying our experience, if we are in the moment of what's there. Because as I said at the start, there might be some suffering here, but that whole layer on top, that's what causes us to stay stuck. And that's what is the suffering about the suffering. And if we can take away the suffering about the suffering, there might still be some suffering, but it's going to be less. But there can be other things that are there in addition to that suffering that we are experiencing. So, there's lots and lots of tangents and places that I could go with this, and I'm mindful of, I'm already past my 10 minutes, and I'm mindful of trying to keep these videos succinct and useful. Maybe we'll explore some of these themes a bit more in other videos. To summarize, look at where your attention is. Look at how much you're actually here in the now. Look at all the stories and all the stuff you're telling yourself about the now. See if you can challenge and change some of those. And see what you can do to practice having your awareness being more here in the moment. It can actively support the recovery process, but it will also reduce the suffering on the path of the recovery process. So I'm just going to check my notes in case there's anything glaringly obvious that I wanted to say. No, I think I've covered it. So I hope that's been useful. Share your thoughts and comments underneath. As I say, we're going to shake up the format and have some play with some interviews and other pieces in the coming weeks. But always feel free to let us know topics and suggestions, and I will talk with you again next week. Thanks for watching.